Hello everybody, Johnny Flyer back on the bench, and I'm still back at work on our American Flyer 312 for the client that sent it in for us. And today working on the smoke box for this one, and as you can see it's all nicely taken apart, and of course we found the offending problem right here. The wick itself had actually burned all the way through, and I've learned nichrome doesn't show up very well, but you can kind of see it shaking around here. But the nichrome had burned through. So best guess as to why it was creating smoke is that somewhere in the shipping process, the two ends, the burned ends, which you can kind of see down here is the burned end. The two burned ends had managed to touch one another and were starting to make some smoke again. But still can't figure out exactly why I wasn't getting the puffs of smoke that you would expect out of this thing. But the wick otherwise actually looked pretty darn good. I was just not willing to open up the top, but tried everything I could to get it to smoke and to get it to puff, and it was at the point where it wasn't even like making any smoke at all. So went ahead, bit the bullet, and opened her up here, and yeah, so what I found, I've taken most of it off at this point. Let me see if I can flip it up here. What I found is that whoever had redone this before had left essentially a giant mound of solder in both of these, as a means, I'm guessing, to capture the nichrome, but in the process of doing that, they just left a giant, it looked like a stalactite of solder, which isn't really necessary. What you're trying to do is you want to get a mechanical connection, and they did create a good mechanical connection here. This one not as much. I found that it was starting to unravel a little bit. I'd pulled that off, and did not get a good chance to check and see if there was any connection between the two of these, simply because the opportunity just didn't present itself in testing, and there was no smoke being produced. So at that point, made some assumptions, pulled the top off, and lo and behold, yeah, it had broken. So unfortunate, to be sure, but it gives me another chance to practice my re-wicking skills, which are burgeoning at best, but we'll get this done. Otherwise, the rest of the engine actually has been cleaned up pretty nicely. So got our the magnet we picked up. We've cleaned up all the arms here, all the connectors that are going to go and connect to the armature. The armature itself has been cleaned and re-epoxied. You can see it drying here. Excuse the mess on the bench. And went back through and disassembled the reverse unit. Cleaned off the fingers a little bit, and also cleaned off the drum, and this is working much nicer now as well. On the bench test we'll do, I'll show you. It's definitely clicking through much more readily, and not sticking the way it used to. I did notice that on 3 of 4, 2 really, but 3 of 4 fingers, you can kind of see this one starting to wear through a little bit. It'll be fine for another year, maybe 2, depending on how much you use it, but definitely want to consider getting that repaired, or at least replaced. So overall, pretty happy with the progress of the engine. This part here, I'm interested in seeing how it turns out, but the rest of this is about ready for reassembly and a good solid bench test. So probably another day or 2, and this should be ready. It was in pretty decent shape as far as engines go. But we did take it all the way down to bare parts here. This one, again, is the one that had all of the polymer material had been stripped off by, I think, attempts to get it cleaned up. But engine is in decent shape. So what we've done is we've gone back through, we cleaned up the reverse unit in here. I put the screws on too early, and I apologize, but that's been completely shined up and ready to go, and it turns a lot better now. It does not stick either. Didn't have any issues with the wiring here. The wiring is new and in really good shape, so no reason to make any changes there. I shined up and tightened the connections here. These had actually gotten pretty loose here, and I just kind of took a small set of pliers to it and just gently bent them back into place so they pinch the flange on the edge of these connectors here a little tighter. No issues in here. Of course, you can kind of see it, but we did clean up the commutator plate so it is as conductive as it can possibly be. And then did a deep clean of the entire chassis, much cleaner now. And this needs, I think, one more slightly real thin coat of the Lebel 106, which is what I use on here. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. We'll do that before we close it up, and it's also been put on the bottom there as well. Again, I go with the less is more technique. So the biggest issue that we had was, as you may recall, the wicking material had been burned through when we took the smoke box apart, and that was why we weren't getting a whole lot of smoke, or we're getting sort of this dribble of smoke as we were. And we were also not getting a puff out of here. Well, what I discovered, I think, was that there was a clog. There was old smoke, I guess, fluid that had congealed, and you can't see it through here. But in here, there is a wall. And it's just a very small, really a pinprick of a hole that's designed to push air. So this bellows here goes back and forth, creates both the choo-choo sound, and there's a little sounder in here that makes the choo-choo sound. But it also pushes through that hole a very small amount of air that pushes the air through a channel here and then comes up and creates that puff of smoke. We weren't getting that puff of smoke, but we were getting kind of a dribble of smoke. And then upon testing a little bit further, the smoke completely died out. And my assumption is that, based off of what I have here on the old wick material, is that I probably made a mechanical connection for a while there when it got shipped to me, and now it's had burned its way all the way through. So I took it apart and took that completely out, replaced it with more of the angel hair material, which again is always a joy to work with. And now I've resoldered and made sure there's a good mechanical connection here. Tested for ohms. Ohms are good. It is sitting just at 35. And double check to make sure there's no coils touching each other. It's always the difficult part of this when you're trying to put this back on and trying to keep the coils and any of the nichrome from touching each other. So fingers crossed that stays the condition that it is. But now we're going to give it a little test here and see how it smokes and how it runs. So here we go. And good for neutral. Oh, there we go. Okay, and then so looking good there. We are definitely getting some significant amount of smoke out of there, which is fantastic news. So that appears to be a repaired engine. So discussed with the owner and made sure that he didn't want to do any repainting or recovering of this area right here. Did not do any cosmetic work on this particular one at the owner's wishes, and didn't do any of the other replacement of parts again at the owner's wishes. So this is going to stay as is, and a few other little things that we noted along the way that will need to be addressed eventually. Probably most pressing are the wheels here, and we were just above spec on the carbon bearings that touch the commutator plate. So it's a 70-year-old engine. Occasionally these things wear down. So anyway, folks, I'm going to take one last track test video here, and that'll close it out. But thanks for watching.